Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to this video about deployment and CI/CD. So before we get actually into deploying our React application, I'd like to talk with you about CI/CD first. So CI stands for continuous integration, and CI is essentially a practice where members of a team integrate their work frequently, and each integration is verified by an automated build that also includes automated testing, so it can detect errors, right, that occur either during the build or during the testing as quick as possible. And the reason that continuous integration, even exists is because what a lot, especially back in the days, but it still happens as of today in many teams, is the following. So you got a code base and there's, multiple developers working on that code base. And then, at a certain moment, you might have some people working for days, weeks, even months working on a certain feature. And then at a certain moment, the product owner or tech lead or whatever, and actually ask the developers to merge their branches to the development branch or even production branch. And what then often happens is that because every developer or maybe some developers have been really, their code base is so different because it has not been like updated for maybe even weeks, months. And that's where you get a lot of probably merge conflicts, a lot of tests that will be failing, maybe even application breaking. So the idea with continuous integration is that you commit and merge the work very often so you don't run into those problems. Now, continuous deployment or delivery is essentially the practice where software can be deployed at any time or even automatically. So when we're talking about continuous deployment, we're talking about like a fully automated pipeline, right? So the build, the testing, and the actual deployment to a to a website is done completely automatically, right? This is as soon as you commit your code and let's say push it to GitHub, that pipeline starts to run. And then if the build process and tests succeed, then your app will automatically be published online, which is, very convenient, of course. But there's also a lot of companies that feel there should at least be some human kind of approval before, really pushing your code to your users. And then we're talking about continuous delivery, right? So this is often a more like what you could call semi-automated pipeline. So you might have your build process and your testing being automatically done, but then to actually put your new code on the web, that requires some human kind of approval. Simply let's say a developer clicking on a button to say, okay, let's actually deploy this online. So in this video, we're going to learn how we can automate that. So when we have our code, how to then automate that build process, doing the testing in an automated way, and then deploying the application so our customers can actually use it. So to deploy our React application, we're going to use Netlify, which is a service provider that essentially allows you to do that, the automated build, running the tests, and then deploying your application. So actually hosting it so other people can visit your app. And I think, there's a lot of options you can choose from, right? There's other than Netlify, you got like Firebase and AWS and Azure. And I mean, there's plenty of possibilities to, put your React app online for other people to use it. But I think Netlify has awesome built-in tools we are also going to use to set up that automated CI/CD pipeline. It, for example, has like even plugins for Cypress that makes it very easy. It has a very good integration with GitHub, which you will see during this video. So, and I think also Netlify has a very generous pricing model. So if you sign up for Netlify, you don't, for example, need a credit card to register. And I think they got a very good pricing model. So even if your application gets a lot of traffic, then you might have to pay some amount to Netlify to keep your app running. But I think that their pricing is very, very nice. You maybe pay like 20, 30, $40 a month. And I can tell you by that time, your application will have, such a huge amount of traffic that you're probably already making like thousands and thousands of dollars with your application. So, I mean, those, couple of tens of bucks a month are not going to break your bank by then. So we're going to get started with a very simple deployment architecture. It's essentially like a one-tier deployment architecture. What we're going to do is we're going to take our code, and then we're going to set up that automated build process that will run the tests. And then if the build process and the test succeed, then the code will automatically be deployed to production, right? So, but it also means that if the build process fails for some reason, or the tests fail for some reason, the code will not be pushed to production. And what's nice about that is that you can be rest assured that you will never push broken code to your client. So as soon as you commit your code to GitHub, the updates are immediate, or at least the build process and testing takes some time, of course, but let's say in a few minutes, your new code is shown to your customer. And let's say you push some code with some bugs in it, and of course, assuming that you have written your tests in a good way, then you can rest assured that Netlify, the CI/CD pipeline, will essentially catch those errors, give you a warning about what actually went wrong, but ensure that your users are not going to use that broken code. So that's why we also want to set up a pipeline like that. So let's actually get started with Netlify. Before we actually do that, I'd like to show you the code base, and I'd like to ask you to clone this repository, which you of course can find down in the description, and push it to your own GitHub. And this is essentially the code from the testing, or the Cypress testing video we did in the testing section of this course. And the only thing I added is because we got the Cypress test, right? So the to-do spec. And I also added a test, a very simple test with React testing library. So we got both React testing library, right? That could be either our units or integration tests. And we got Cypress, which is our end-to-end test. And yeah, so that's essentially the application we're going to deploy. So before we get started with Netlify, I'd like you to clone the starter repository and to push it to your own GitHub. So I will do that as well. You can find this link down in the description. So this is actually the branch, or at least the project we are wanting to clone. So I will copy this right here, and then I will go to my some folder on my computer, and I will say git clone single branch, and then branch, and then we want to give it a branch name, so I'll just call it main, and this is then where we can paste the project URL. There we go. So it was called, let's see, React Course Deployment Starter. So I can actually go into cd React Course Deployment Starter. There we go. And I will just restart my code editor in this. So this will give you the starter code. So this is actually the code we used in the Cypress video about testing. This is the exact same app. It's a to-do app, but you don't have to go through it. That's not really important. The only thing you should know is that this application, besides the app component, has a test that was set up with React testing library. and it has a end-to-end test with Cypress. So we got, both React Testing Library and Cypress for our tests. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Of course, the only thing you need to do is to push this code to GitHub. So let's actually do that. So we'll go to GitHub and create a new repository. And I will call this, let's see, React course deployment. There we go. Create repository. And now you want to add a origin to from your command line, but if you will do something like this, you will probably get this same error. It says fatal remote origin already exists. And I think if we Google that, you can simply run a command. It's where we remove the, yeah, it's this one, git remote remove origin. That's it. So we can paste that, and then we can execute the previous command. So now we can add the origin, and now we want to push the branch. And now you'll see whenever I reload the page. Let's see. There we go. So now we got our code on GitHub. So now we have that set up. We can actually start with Netlify. And the first thing you will need with Netlify is an account. So you can head over to netlify.com. And I already have signed up for an account, but you can do it as well. It's very simple. You don't need a credit card or whatsoever. But as you can see, I can log in because I already have an account. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to connect Netlify with GitHub and make a new site from Git. So what you need to do after you're logged in, you can click right here, new site from Git. And then you have to select GitHub. And then this will, if you do this for the first time, it will probably ask you if you want to authorize Netlify to, well, check your code that is out there in GitHub. And now we've done that, I will search for the branch, or actually for this project. So let's take a look. Why is that not found? I think because we had a space in there. Yeah, there we go. So I want to take this one, React course deployment. And now you will see it already has some default settings. Now we can pretty much leave this as is. However, we want to change the build command, and we want to change it to yarn test, and then have the double ampersand and have yarn build. So now it says yarn build, but I will add yarn test with the double ampersand. And this will ensure that during the build process, the tests are executed automatically as well. So that will run the React testing library. So now when I click on deploy site, what you will see is that the site deploy is in progress. And if you click right there, and right here you get a deploy log. So this is essentially the deploy that's now being executed. The first time it probably takes a little bit longer because Netlify makes use of some caching. So your future deploys can be a lot more performant, can be a lot faster. So once the build has been deployed, I will get back to you and we take a look at what actually happened. All right, so I'm back and the build has completed, as you can see. And when I scroll up right here, you see that yarn test was actually run, which ran the React scripts test. And thus our React testing library test we wrote right here in app.test.js. As you can see, it says if user enters a to-do, the to-do is shown. You see the same line right here. And you can see that the test actually passed. And if this test would have failed, then the build itself would also have failed, but since it succeeded, Netlify actually continued the deploy of the site. And what's pretty neat is that if we go back to our project right now, you see right here we got most of the time they have like very strange random names, but when I click right here on this link, we will actually have the application right here, and this is now accessible for everyone, right? So everyone is able to visit this page and make use of this application. And what's nice is that right now we got Netlify in place that runs our CI/CD pipeline. So I can actually show you that. So let's imagine we want to change the well, let's actually change the login title. Okay, so I go right here to the app component, and then right here it says login. So let's say login 123. And now whenever I save this and I add this to, or make a new commit to GitHub, so say git add, git commit, and I will call this change login title, and say git push, you will see that whenever I now go back to Netlify, let's take a look. Oh, there we go. Production deploys. So now you will see that new build has automatically been fired off, and now it's going to do the same thing again. So it's going to go through that build process and it's going to do the tests, and then when the tests succeed and the build itself will also succeed, it will then deploy the changes automatically to our app. So I will actually wait for this build to finish, and I will get them back to you. Yeah, so the build has finished, and now whenever I go in, or could have also reloaded, of course, but now when I go to the app, you'll see it says login 123, and that's because the build was published, and you can also see that the tests also passed. So that's pretty nice. I'd like to go one step further, because now we only run our React testing library tests, or unit or integration tests. Now, let's say we also want to make sure our Cypress tests are run. So what we can do then is install the Cypress Netlify plugin. So when I go back to Netlify, I can go right here, can click on the project, go to plugins, go to the plugins directory, and then we can search for Cypress, and I want to install this one right here, and I want to install it on Thirsty Nut, which is our application. So now we got Cypress, the Cypress plugin installed, and the next thing you usually want to do, it already is done in the starter code right here, but right here you have the cypress.json file, and what you generally want to do is set the video to false, because Cypress will like generate a video screen recording of your application, but because that cannot be stored on the Netlify servers, you can better disable it so you save some build time. But of course it's already in here, so now you don't have to worry about that. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create a netlify.toml file in the root of our application, so just like where the git ignore or Cypress file lives. So let's actually do that. We'll call it netlify.toml, and for this, I recommend you to go to the documentation of the plugin. So if we go right here to Cypress, you can see read plugin docs, and that will direct you to a GitHub file right here. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have a pre-built. So by default, if you have the plugin installed, the Cypress test will run after the deploy has been done. And even though that's great already, what you rather have is that the tests are run before the actual build is done. So whenever your Cypress tests fail, your complete build will fail as well, and thus your deploy will not take place. But that is not done automatically, so we have to add a small pre-built script. So the first thing we want to do is at the recommended settings right here, because what it does, it uses a Cypress cache folder, so it cache in between builds. That speeds up your build process. So I will copy this and paste that right here. And the next thing we want to do is we want to add the pre-build. Yeah, I actually have to scroll down a little bit. Yeah, so here's the testing the site before build. So I will copy this and I will put that right here. I can actually replace this. What you will see is that it will essentially start Cypress on a local host port 5000, and we want to change this, by the way, to 3000 because that's the default port of our React application. And then it will wait for well, at max 30 seconds for the local host to start, and then it's going to run the Cypress test. So before we are actually going to commit these changes, we should also change the start command. Instead of npm, we'll say yarn start, and right here the build command, instead of npm run build, will be yarn test and yarn build. So now when I save it, I will commit this, say git add, git commit, and I will see add Netlify .toml file, git push. So now the build is going to start, and I'll get back to you once it's done. Right, so the build succeeded. As you can see, the Netlify plugin also had one successful test, and if I scroll down, you will see that we have on pre-build command that ran the Cypress test, which passed, and then after that it ran the test we created with React testing library, which also passed, and then after the site was deployed, then the onSuccess command was run, and that's already done by default by using the Cypress plugin, and also that test succeeded, which is great. And now what essentially happened, because we had a Cypress test run twice, and the first time on the pre-build, it actually, let's scroll all the way up. Yeah, you can see that it actually created a development environment, and that's where it tested the application. So just like we did before in the Cypress testing tutorial video, where we created a local development build and then run the Cypress test locally. So that's done on pre-built, but then once the site is actually deployed, then Cypress again goes over it, and it will actually, as you can see right here, will test the deployed version of your application. So you got some extra security checks right there. So yeah, that was it pretty much for this video, where we essentially took a look at like a one-tier deployment architecture. In the next video, we're going to take a look how we can do this in a little bit more realistic kind of environment, if you would be working with, for example, a couple of developers or even more on one project. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.